Okay, if you'd announce the page number and we'll get started.
Okay, so we are in Bava Metzia Chof Hey Amud Aleph, Chof Hey Amud Aleph, and we're in the second parak, Ela Metzias, and we've been discussing in Ela Metzias what kinds of findings have to be returned or at least announced. In other words, the whole question, which we've gone through many times, is: do I have an achrayas to return? Do I have another achrayas to return? So there's a mitzvah Shabbos Aveda, clearly you do. And then the question is, how much is required of us to do it? So if we don't do it, what are the ramifications? Okay, so those are questions that the Gemara has ongoing. And we have been studying the Mishnah here in the last couple of daf to tell us a list of what we have to announce. So we finished last week with a sort of an enigma, because we talked about piles of fruit and piles of money, and at the end of the day, the Gemara did not conclude what to do. Remember, we went back and forth. Is it, do you announce place? Do you announce? So the Gemara kind of left it a little bit ambiguous. This week's Gemara is fascinating, as we're going to see now, because here the Gemara does set a standard. The Mishnah says, Shlosha matbeas ze al gabe ze, you have to announce. So the question is, what does that mean? 3 coins, one on top of the other. Look at the very top Rashi in Chaf Hey Amud Aleph. Shlosha matbeas ze al gabe ze, but Gemara mafarish simonehu. The Gemara will explain the simon. All right, that's the Rashi of the Mishnah. Now we're up to the 2 dots, kind of maybe a little bit past the halfway part of the, maybe 6 or so, 7 lines before the wide lines. Where the Gemara starts on the first word, Shlosha matbeos ze al gabi ze. So the Gemara is reiterating the Mishnah and saying if you have 3 coins, one on top of the other, you must return. But nothing more. What does it mean? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Migdala. This is a play on words, actually, because the Mefarshim say that this Rabbi Yitzchak has one chiddush in Shas, and that's this. And Migdala is a loose definition of the word tower, Migdal. And Shlosha matbeas ze al gabe ze, as we're going to see in a minute, means money piled in a tower. So it's kind of a play on words that Rabbi Yitzchak is giving us a chiddush about announcing money that you find if it's in the form of a tower. Okay, just a hint. Now we're going to see what the Gemara says. Zak the Gemara on Rabbi Yitzchak Migdala, v'hu she'asan k'migdalin. The only time you have to announce it is when it is done like a tower. Now take a look at Rashi, rather lengthy Rashi, but important, right to the right of that Gemara. V'hu she'asan k'migdalin, he made it like a tower. The Kame Mefarish, sheshloshtan rochban ze mizeh. What does the Gemara mean? That the Gemara, in other words, he's explaining that when you do return it, this is the scenario of how the coins have to be. 3 coins, let's say a minimum. Okay, 3 coins, rochban ze mizeh, not the same size, different widths. $50, a quarter, a dime, as an example. Umeniach milmata esar rochav, and you put on the bottom the widest coin, v'olavas habeinani, and on top of it the middle coin, the elyon hu akotzer shebekulam, kemigdal, like a tower, right? You have a $50, a quarter, a dime. It's not straight up. It looks like a tower. That, he says, is a siman that if you find it, you have to announce. That's what Rabbi Yitzchak is saying. In other words, again, I won't get ahead of ourselves, but any other scenario, l'chari, you don't have to announce because it's not a tower. So he's very specific in what he says. So, weiter in Rashi, So Rashi's telling us specifically, when you find coins in this configuration, it clearly didn't fall down. He didn't drop out of his pants and fall in this fashion. It is in the derech of placement. And the person who put it there, his thought was to return the little and take it back. Therefore, you have to announce. So the process is you find money like that, you walk along, and there's these three coins that look neatly stacked. You can't keep them, you announce them, you don't give specifics, and then you'll let someone come and say, oh yeah, those are the coins. And you know what? $50, quarter, dime, whatever. So that's this system, that's the shot. Very clearly. All right.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. So the implication is if you found 4, 5, 6 silver dollars, all the same diameter, but stacked neatly one on top of the other, that would not qualify as a simon.
So Yale, you've hit the jackpot question, because that's exactly what our Gemara is going to discuss.
And I did not read ahead for what it's worth.
And you didn't read ahead. You didn't read ahead. Because you're right. I mean, l'chaira, according to this view, what's the difference if you have 3 stacked like a tower or 6 stacked uniform coins one on top of the other? It's not haphazard. It's not random.
Right.
But yet, according to one mandam of the Gemara, it's a big difference. So,
right.
So this will become a machlokes in the Gemara very shortly as to whether or not what we're now saying is Shloshim Matbeos, a tower, is the real McCoy. Yeah,
so, but we've also had it earlier, and I don't think we ever really resolved it that at various times, that simply having a multiple of a thing and that the number of the thing would be itself a simon, which in theory would matter. If you have 17 quarters sitting there, whether they're in a stack or in a pile, you might argue, I found quarters, tell me how many,
Separate Shiloh, but yes, so in other words, does that qualify as numbers that you have to announce?
Right. Maybe the difference here is, and I haven't read ahead, so I don't know. Maybe the difference here is that here we would say it as little as 3 when it has this additional idea of being stacked as a tower, but that if it was to be just simply the number, that it would have to be some higher number.
Yeah, I mean, numbers may play a role. When he says Shloshim Matbeos, I mean, it could have been 5, like a half a dollar, a quarter, a dime, a nickel. In other words, we're not going to just stelzach on the fact that he says 3, although 3 is an important minimum number, very important. Can't be 2, but so he says 3 being the minimum of a multiple, right? If I say I find coins, it's at least 2, because I said coins. You don't know if it's 3 or 10 or whatever. So 2 becomes problematic because you already said 2. You said coins.
Yeah.
So
isn't the issue here, Rabbi? The issue sounds like you're trying to discern whether it was an accidental dropping of coins or accidental versus some human activity to organize it, such that it was man-made organization rather than random.
And at least required to announce it, right? Exactly.
Somebody could also have the coins drop and put them down intentionally, not in a tower, but put a couple of twigs around it or something to show that this scene was man-made. It's not random.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see in a minute. Yeah. But what you're positing is a side question, because what happens if money falls, and we don't know, and then some dirt or twigs or things fall around it? So the chayra, you might argue, oh, someone put down some money and then covered it so that no one should see it. But that begs a different question, because you might argue, oh, twigs, dirt around money, yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe someone did it or not. But it's very hard to argue a stack of money in a configuration that fell out of somebody's pocket. it just doesn't happen. You just don't have someone dropping 3 coins, one, starting with a quarter, whatever, $50. It just doesn't happen. So your point could very well be that someone who covered up may have covered up, and that may be a siman, but that's a separate question from ours.
But you're still dealing with probabilities here.
You're dealing with probability. Yeah, no, you're dealing with probabilities. But remember, what's the underlying question that we're dealing with? What's the minimum for someone to say, I need to announce? That's the underlying question. I mean, we're dealing with very interesting stuff here, but the underlying question is this enough for me if I find it that I have a chiyuv lahachris?
Yeah.
That's really, keep that in mind. That's the focus of what we're learning here. Yeah, Menashe.
Yeah. So years ago, I had a customer that had these coin machines in supermarkets, and you throw the money in and it counts it, and you get a receipt and you redeem it for some real money. And in the process of working on these, we figured out that there was a problem. Sometimes you have to test and see whether every different coin worked. So we came up with a scheme which worked, that the guy going around doing the service, every machine he would get to, along with cleaning it and everything else, he would put in $1, a $50, quarter, dime, nickel, and penny, and we would see this transaction pop up $1.91. Now, there may have been and if it didn't, then there was something wrong you have to fix. There probably were other times that there were transactions of $1.91. Somebody throws in 191 pennies, but I'd be willing to bet that we never ever had exactly that combination of one of each, except the guy deliberately doing it. So it's kind of
right. Yeah, it kind of enforces it. Now, you can extrapolate in today's times what would be similar to Shlosheh Matbeis. Because remember, Shlosheh Matbeis is a pretty rudimentary thing in the time of the Gemara. I mean, we're talking the time of the Gemara, Someone found 3 coins, didn't know what to do with them, went to the base medrash, knocked on the shulchan and said, anybody lose money at Arcola and Kersey? So then someone pops up, yeah, I think I lost money. Okay, what did you lose? I lost some dimes, some nickels. Okay, but if he comes back and says, well, I lost a quarter, and on top of it, or I lost a $50, on top of it a quarter, on top of it a dime, that's the simon. So in other words, you prod him to tell you what specifically happened here. Anyway, so let's move on a little bit. So says the Gemara, okay, no. So, okay. Tanya Nami Hachi, all right. So Rabbi Yitzchak Migdala said his thing, and now we're going to bring a proof from a brisa. Tanya Nami Hachi, there is a brisa which says, Matzah mos mefuzaros hari elu shalo. If a person's walking along and he finds scattered money on the ground, it's 100% his. He doesn't have to think about it. Osuyun kimigdalim chayim lahachos. But if he sees a tower, chayav lahachos. Says the brisa, the Elohein asuyun kimigdalim. What does it mean, migdalim? Shloshim et ben zeh al gabe zeh. 3 piled one on top of the other. So the chayra, right from there, from that brisa, we have a proof to Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Yitzchak wants to prove himself from a brisa. Says the Gemara, not so fast. Ogufa kasha. That brisa said 2 things, and it's a stira. What did the brisa say? Amrit matzamos mefuzaros. The brisa said, if you found scattered money elu shalo, then it's yours. But what did it say after? Ha mishlachafe shachufe chayiv lahachriz. But if you found coins kind of one on the other, forget about a tower. In other words, if it's free fall, it's yours. If it's not free fall, and you had a bunch of coins and some of them were leaning against another and some were not, chayiv lahachriz, says that brisa. So that's not the same. All of a sudden, we see that you don't need a tower. Even coins that haphazardly fell on one another, you have to return. A seifa. Now let's look at the seifa of that brisa, which says, "Osin kimigdalin chayiv lahachriz." If you found it like a tower, you're chayiv lahachriz, which is what we are saying. Ha mishlachafe shalchufe hari elu shelo. However, something less than that, what? A couple coins falling on each other, you don't have to return. So that's the stira of the brisa. According to the first part of the brisa, loose coins are good. Coins that seem to not be totally free zoned, but a couple here, a couple there, some touching, some overlapping, you have to return. Why? Because this brisa is taking the position that that's not haphazard. If you drop some coins out of your pocket and they happen to fall in a pattern, not a tower pattern, but a pattern of, some are touching, some are not, according to the first part of the brisa, you must announce that. Yet the second part of the brisa, which says that only if it's a tower do you have to announce it, then we extrapolate anything less than a tower, i.e., a couple coins sitting one on top of the other, you don't have to announce. So it's a stira in the brisa. So the kasha here is, Rabbi Yitzchak made an announcement. And he said, you know what? I'm going to prove my point from a brisa. Fine. And he cites the brisa. The brisa has a beginning, the brisa has an end, but the brisa seems to be in stira, because the first part would suggest that only free coins you don't have to announce, but anything that's not totally not touching, you have to announce. And the second half says only stacked you have to announce. Anything less than stacked, meaning touching, is okay. So that's a stira. On the face of it, it's a stira in the brisa, right? I mean, do we see that clearly? Is it's because we have a two-part brisa, and the first part suggests one thing, and the second part of the brisa suggests something else. It isn't clear, but it suggests that the standard, according to the first part, the standard is only when money is totally spread out, not touching, is it not returnable. But if it even is even touching a little, you have to return. And the second part of the brisa says, no, only stacked like a tower is it returnable. Short of that, if you have money, even if it's touching each other, it's yours. That's the shaila here. That's what the Gemara is saying. It's a stira in the brisa.
Little question, terminology. I wonder if it's a convenient word, but it may not be the right thing here. We say returnable. It's not that we can't announce or return if somebody comes to us and says, hey, did you find it or whatever. It's that we're not required to. So it's not that it's returnable. Everything is returnable.
No. You're 100% right. Remember, I said the underlying principle of this whole Gemara is what responsibilities do you have to announce? You're 100% right. Returnable, not returnable. Do you even, if some of the money, let's say 10 coins fell, 5 are not touching each other and 5 are overlapping and touching each other. Do you have a responsibility of saying someone lost money? If a caller in Kersey, if it is, come and talk to me. Do you even have that responsibility? According to one part of the brisa, you don't, and according to one part of the brisa, you do. That's the stira. In other words, is it all or nothing? Is it a free for all and a tower, or is it something in between that if monies are touching each other? I mean, how reasonable is it for you to walk along and you want to take some money out and give it to your friend, your child, whatever, and then you drop a bunch of coins? I mean, we've seen it all the time. You come along and then you see a quarter, a dime, a nickel. Most of it is not touching, but 1 or 2 of the coins are sort of touching each other. Says the brisa here, depending on how you look at the brisa, you may or may not have to announce that. That's the question here of the brisa. That's the shaila. So the Gemara wants to quash this question right away, and says the Tana of that brisa, kol shein osin k'migdalim lefazaros karelei. Right away he tells us, no, don't make a mistake. When I say migdalin, I mean migdalin. Anything that isn't actual migdalin, meaning money that haphazardly is touching each other because it just fell in a random style, that doesn't count. So according to this Tana of this Mishnah, the brisa, there is no stira because it's an all or nothing proposition. You find a tower, you got to return. Anything short of a tower, touching, not touching, doesn't matter. Whether the money is in total free for all or partial free for all and partial overlapping, it doesn't matter. Okay, so Says Rashi. Okay, give him a Matthias. We said she'ain doma zulu zulu rechavin. Mishlachafe shalchufe mixes zu al chaverta. Part of the money is on its neighbor. The mixes al gabe karka. In other words, it's a combination of free money all over and money touching each other. So, in the Gemara's question, where does that lean to? Does it lean to total free for all, or does it lean to a tower? One can argue, wait a minute, okay, the money is touching each other, that should be like a tower. It's not a tower, but it should be like a tower because the money is touching each other. So that was the Havamina, that was the question on the stira, right? So the answer is right away, no. If it's not a tower, it's nothing. Okay, so that's the answer to that question. Okay, so now we're going to go weiter, and we're going to try to understand what these three coins are. This is what I said is so fascinating, is that the Gemara is so focused on this. Okay, so now we understand about the three coins. We understand that they have to be what it has to look like. Now we're going to get to Yale's question. Because Yale, you were asking a question, what happens if they're stacked, but they're all the same size? So we're going to talk about variations of that question in a minute here. Amar Rabbi Chanina, 3 lines into the wise. Amar Rabbi Chanina says, Lo shanu ela shlosha malachim. Not only are we talking about shlosha malachim. In other words, once upon a time, when kings or leaders were minting coins, they minted coins of varying sizes and varying pictures. They would mint a coin of themselves. They would mint a coin of the Arch of who knows what, or Archititus, or whatever. So in other words, you had all kinds of multiple coins of sizes and pictures. Now, this is important, believe it or not. Says Rabbi Chanina, Lo shanu ela shel shlosha malachim abel shel melech echad en chayv lahachriz. You have to have 3 different kings on the coins. If you have melech echad on all 3 coins, no good. You don't have to announce it. What does that have to do with announcing? So Rabbi Chanina is opening up our eyes here to a question which we're now going to explore, is what's really pshat in a migdal? When we say a tower, what are we really saying? Because l'chayra, according to this, melech echad en chayv lahachos. Frek the Gemara hechadam. What is Rabbi Chanina saying? This is a very obvious question. Ida asen kemigdalin, if it truly is a tower. What difference does it make if it's 3 kings or 1 king? It's a migdal. If it's a migdal, you have to announce. Do I care if the same king appears on all 3 coins? What do I care? Why are you making that distinction? The ida ain't asen kemigdalin, and if it's not a migdal, what do I care if it's 3 different pictures, 3 different? You're stelling Zechen saying it has to be 3 kings. And I'm asking you, what does 3 kings have to do with a tower? If it's a tower whether it's 3 kings or 1 king. So that's the obvious question of Chanina, because Rabbi Chanina wanted to be mechadish here. You know what? You got to have 3 kings. And right away the Gemara says, what are you talking about 3 kings? If the key is migdal, what does 3 kings have to do with it? That's the Gemara's kasha.
Excuse me, now we're assuming that each king put out different size coins for different value.
Correct.
So
Correct.
the question is,
each king could have put out a half a different size coins. We don't know.
so what's the difference if they're kings or not? Because if the coins are lining up, 3 of them larger, smaller, miniature, that would satisfy what the Mishnah said.
You would think, and that's exactly the kasha. What Rabbi Chanina are you coming to tell us that you have to have 3 different pictures? What are you introducing something that when we thought about three matbeos of three different sizes, we don't care what's on the thing. It's a tower. It's the fact that it's a tower that's motivating us to say you've got to announce.
It was definitely man-made.
Right, and we're assuming that's man-made. So now you're introducing that it has to be three pictures, three kings. If it's not three kings, it doesn't count. What does one have to do? Either it's a tower or it's not a tower. That's the Gemara's kasha here. What are you saying, Reb Chanina? Emfret the Gemara, ela itmar hachi itmar. This is the way to understand what Reb Chanina is saying. Lo shani ela shel melech echad ke'en shlosh malachim. It's okay if you have melech echad like shlosh malachim. In other words, if you have one king, but it's stacked like a migdal with three different sizes, that's okay. So don't look at the picture, look at the formation. So in other words, he's saying, when you said, Ela shel melech echad, you meant melech echad ke'en shlosh malachim. You meant one king, like three kings, meaning three different, like a tower, right? And in parentheses, he says, when Aguirre says, Abel shel melech echad ein chayv lahakos. V'heicha dami, and how should it be, even with that one king, with that one picture, how should it be? So then he goes on and he explains, like we said before, the Assyrian Kimigdalin, Revicha Tata, the biggest one on the bottom, Umetzia Alea, in the middle on top, in the middle, Bezuta Alea, Metzia, and on top of it was the small one. Okay, so in other words, he's explaining it like our Gemara. First, he's wanted to diverge and say, no, it has to be three pictures, it has to be three kings. And he says, no, that's not what I meant. What I meant is, I'm not worried about what's on the coin. The coin can be the same king, but it's got to be like a migdal. So, l'chayra, Yale, to your question, one king is okay, but a stack of 10 is not okay. I mean, l'chayra, it looks very unusual. Nobody drops out of his pocket a stack of 10 coins that happen to fall on each other unless you're some kind of a magician. But according to Rav Chanina, if it doesn't fit into this category of migdal, doesn't matter whether it's one king or three kings, it doesn't count. So we want to immediately disband Rav Chanina's notion that you have to have three kings. You don't have to have three kings. One king is good, but the formation is what counts. The migdal formation is what counts. So for some reason, the Chazal, I mean, at the time of the Gemara, they found that to be sort of an inviolate position. Nobody drops a migdal. People may drop coins, but nobody drops a migdal. So a migdal became the standard, whether it was one king, I mean, pictures of one king, or pictures of multiple kings, didn't matter. Okay. Now, okay, because we say that they fell one on top of the other, and therefore it's okay. Aval shel melech echad, but one king, dekula ki hadodininu, according to Rabbi Chanina, if it's one king, and they fell in a stack like you announced, afagav the mincha hadadi, even though they fell one on top of the other, hari elu shelo. So according to Rav Chanina, your example of a stack of coins from one king that fell one on top of the other, you don't have to announce.
So it really, really limits, this concept of stacking coins, and somebody, puts them down and then figures will come back for them later. He really has to have a variety of change in his pocket to make this whole thing work.
Precisely. This again, so Chanina is telling us something very unusual, that this is the only way that we're going to require someone to have to undertake. Remember, the whole question is how much are we metriach for Hashavas Aveda? So we can be liberal, or we can say, no, you got to be more conservative and do the mitzvah. Here, it would seem that it's a pretty difficult standard to meet to have to do a Shabbos Aveda. Yeah.
Yeah, to take a very modern example, though, you have 40 quarters and you drop them. You drop them in a pile. Everybody would agree it's random. Somebody had a whole big pile of change and they dropped. Fine, you can't identify. You drop, if you find 40 quarters in a stack, or if you find a roll of quarters, it's the same 40 quarters.
A roll of intact quarters. Okay.
A roll of intact quarters, that's even more man-made. And yet that, I would argue, is one single item that's totally anonymous. Banks go through tons, and retail stores go through a whole bunch of these rolls of quarters. One roll of quarters means nothing. And yet if you found 40 quarters, not in a roll, stacked up, I'd say that's a pretty good sim.
I would tend to agree with you.
And yet, according to this,
but according to Rabbi Hanina, it doesn't meet the test. But I would agree, right? I mean, we'd all say, if you found a roll of quarters, who wouldn't get up and announce, did anybody lose any money here? And someone says, I lost a roll of quarters. I mean, that seems so logical that it doesn't even require any great debate. But
no, I'd argue the opposite, that the roll of quarters, even though, yes, it's a lot of money, but it's something that's, in a certain sense, very, very anonymous. Anybody, in theory, if you have a busy marketplace and you have the people all going back and forth their cash registers at the end of the day, etc., a roll of quarters, it could be from anywhere, and there's nothing to identify. But 40 quarters stacked up,
then you have a different question. No, look, you could be right. You could be right. But again, we're seeing how narrow this focus is. So take a look at Rashi. Or all three appearances, all 3 points were the same. Even if they were all one king, the coins were all of the same appearance. They all had King Richard. But they were like three. So his definition of like three has nothing to do with the picture. They were like three berachvan in width. The dumyan legimel madbeos. So again, Rabbi Hanina is focusing on not the coin, but how it was set up, so that you could have one coin of one ruler of one person, and as long as it was barashma. Okay, so fine. So now that's where we are right now. Okay, that's Rav Hanina. And he's sticking to his guns, and he's not going to move. Comes Rabbi Yochanan, but for 5 lines in the bottom. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, afilu shemelech echad nami machris. Even one king, you have to machris. In other words, has nothing. He's pointing out, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that it is not totally on the tower, right? So Yale, your example fits into Rabbi Yochanan. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, you drop a stack of King Richards, one on top of the other, you have to be machris, because he doesn't hold of the tower theory, right? Frek the Gemara, my machris. What's he going to announce? What's he going to announce? In other words, he's a little bit skeptical. And for the Gemara, minion, he's going to announce a number. Did someone lose coins? And you're gonna come forward, Yale, and you're gonna say, I lost 10 coins stacked one on top of the other. So now we go back to the minion question. Remember, we had a machlokes between Rava and Rabba, whether minion is allowed, and Rava says minion is allowed. So according to Rava, you can announce minion number. So here he's going to go ahead and announce number. That's what so Rabbi Yochanan argues on Rabbi Hanina. Correct the Gemara. If you're going to say that minion is okay, Mar area Talasa Afilu Tartanami. Why say 3? Why not go with 2? In other words, why does the Gemara have to say Shlosha Matbeos, and we're meaning to say it was 3 coins? It doesn't have to be 10 Yale, but in other words, a stack of coins, one on top of the other.
Right.
Let it be 2 coins. 2 coins, and then someone comes and says, "Yeah, I lost 2 coins that were sitting FDR $half sitting one on top of the other." That's the Gemara's kasha according to Rabbi Yochanan. Why if you're talking minion, why bother 3? Amar Ravina, comes Ravina, and he says, no. Well, again, 2 is problematic, like we said at the outset, because if I say that anybody lose coins, there's 2 coins there. I mean, you don't have to guess. I mean, you may be wrong because there's more than 2, but you can outright guess and say there's 2 and be right. So we can't allow you to just do it with 2. Comes Ravina, and Ravina says, you know what? This is what has to happen. A person finds coins. He says, I found coins. Doesn't say anything beyond that. The person who comes and wants to identify them has 2 responsibilities. A, how many coins? And B, in what configuration? So Ravina is answering Rabbi Yochanan's, the query on Rabbi Yochanan by saying, really, it can be one, it doesn't have to be like Rav Chanina, a tower, except that you have a different responsibility. If you drop coins, now you have to answer 2 questions. How many coins and how do they look? So Ravina wants to for Rabbi Yochanan and say that, we can learn like Rabbi Yochanan do, not just like Rav Chanina, because we'll take a different approach. We'll take a numbers approach, not just like the tower approach. What's the point of all this? I mean, it's a fascinating machlokes, but it's so, it's so up in the air. Again, the Gemara is sort of teaching us a mahalach here that, when you go out and you live your life, you just got to be aware. And it's giving us at least parameters for what you should do. I mean, you have people coming and asking, what should I do with this? What should I do with that? Is this right? Is this wrong? I mean, people ask questions because they want to do the right thing. So when it comes to Hashavas Haveda, to this mitzvah, what's the line? So here we have a clear machlokes on Meroim as to what the line is. I mean, that's why I say it's a fascinating discussion. Who would think that this whole some of this question would turn on size of coins, position of coins? I mean, today, if you're walking along and you see, I mean, today obviously it's harder because we have more and more people. But let's say we were a smaller community and you found something that looked unusual. You'd go to the Rav, and the Rav would say, or put into the sheet, anybody lose any money? And someone will come and say, you know what, Grada, I did lose some money, and here's what it was. So, at least you open up the opportunity for Hashavas Haveda. That's kind of the principle, but the Gemara here wants to show us a real machlokes hamayroim as to whether or not how far you have to go in doing it. And that's really the study here.
A problem remains if you use the numbers, because on any one of our sidewalks, if you drop some money and some of it is there, but some of it went into the grass and nobody will notice those numbers. The guy who lost it, who really honestly lost it, comes along, he will identify the wrong number of coins because he knows he dropped 15 coins, there's only 10 on the sidewalk, 5 went into the grass, will never be seen again.
Right,
But as you say, the rabbis are trying to resolve this tension between returning it to the legitimate loser
right.
and somebody who's just trying to game the system. You heard that, somebody found money, he'll take a guess, et cetera, and they don't want to return it to the wrong person. So it's not possible to totally resolve it, but the problem remains with the numbers as well as the towers, the shapes.
Right, but David, in your example, since it's most mufazaris, it would never reach the threshold level of being returnable because it's most mufazaros. Part of it on the sidewalk.
Yes, correct. What the parameters though is set for requiring it to be announced or returned, but it leaves it in the discretion of the person who found it. If he thinks that the person who came along is sincere and just couldn't identify the exact number, he still has the prerogative of returning it to him. If he thinks he lost his kid's lunch money.
Right, exactly. All right, so that ends this question. Now the Gemara just continues with a couple of other hypotheticals. Boy, Rabbi Yirmiyah, kosher mahu. What do you do if you found a circle of coins? Somehow like a bracelet. Rashi says like a bracelet. A circle of coins. Kashura, a straight line mahu. Kichatsuva mahu. So Rashi says, let's take a look. Chatsuva kagon ragle kankan kol echad keneged avir shel shnei kazeh. In other words, like a triangle. So if you found an ogul, okay, kosher mutal ba ogul, kashura zeh etzel zeh, kichatsuva kegimel ragle kankan, like the 3 legs of a kankan, kol echad keneged avir shel shnei kazeh. And then another example, kusulam. Let's say you found coins on the ground that looked like a ladder, meaning that you had some coins on top of it that leaned on that, some coins on top of it that leaned on that. So when you looked at it, it looked like a ladder because of the way the coins were configured. So these are just general questions. What do you do? Do you have to announce these? Are these unusual? Since the Gemara is already talking about unusual configurations, the Gemara is asking, what do you do in these situations? And for the Gemara, Pashat Mehai Chada. I'm going to answer one of them. I'm not going to be able to give you an answer on everything, says the Gemara, but I'm going to give you an example on one. What is the example? Dama Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua Kol She'elu Machnus Lo Kisem B'Neim B'Notlim B'Vasachas Chayiv Lahachus. Very interesting stimin. In other words, if you can take, let's say something's lying on the ground and you can pick it up. He means to say over here with kisam, with a piece of wood. But let's say even today you can pick it up with I have this little piece of paper. Let's say you can scoop it up as one. If you can scoop something up as one and keep it intact, chayiv lahachlis. Again, we're talking about a principle here. So you find things. What am I supposed to do with it? So he's giving us an example. He says, if you can pick all of it up together with a sliver of wood or with something that you can sort of scoop it up, chayav lahachris, you have to be machris. Why do you have to be machris? So he says, if you have a kasulam mitlam of you can take it of asachas. Because again, in principle, it's something unusual. So someone, if you announced it, someone would come and say, oh, sure, I had coins and they configured like a ladder. It's a question of giving rise to how unusual is it that someone would come out and say, yes, that's got to be mine because I dropped it that way. So again, the Gemara just wants to give us that example. Now,
I don't understand what just happened here.
okay.
If you have stuff on the ground, the fact that you can pick it up with a sheet of paper, what does it prove?
Again, we're talking about a standard, Jay. What it proves is that it's something unusual that someone would say, oh, yes, that's got to be mine. Again, we're talking concept here.
Yeah.
In other words, what's the standard by which you have an obligation to at least notify the public, I found something?
The fact that you pick it up without
Something-
disturbing the pattern, is that what the Gemara is saying?
Say it again, something?
The fact that you can lift something up without disturbing the pattern of the way it fell?
And it's an unusual pattern, yes, then I have to announce it.
But
So
how
if the
unusual does this one have to be? Because it's not a tower.
No, we're not talking tower anymore. We're now just,
Oh, I know.
we're talking about heichetimtzes, examples out there of what might be something. We've already finished with Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yochanan. We're now asking the question of what the standard is. Still, what is the standard for where someone has to announce a Shabbos Aveda? And we're saying, if you can salvage something that's unusual, I'm not talking about one coin sitting in the middle of the street, but you got a configuration of stones that looks unusual. And we're going to see that the next Gemara gives us an example. What should I just ignore it, or should I try to announce it? So the Gemara says try to announce it. Let's just take a look here.
Real quick.
We're going to swing to Chof Hey and Medbez the top, just to give you an example, Jay, of your case. Boy, Ravashi. Ravashi asks, Avnei Beis Kulis Mahu. There was something called Avnei Beis Kulis. In the Roman times, they used to worship that stones, that things that they would worship, and they would put together a formulation of stones. If someone found, walking along, and he found a facsimile of Avnei B'nai Kulis, he found, we'll see what B'nai Kulis is in a minute, but it's an unusual configuration that was used at the time of the Romans.
But they cemented it or something to keep it together.
No, yeah, we'll see in a minute. But if you're walking along and you see Avnei B'nai Kulis and you scratch your head, wait a minute, what is this? This is totally, this is not normal. You don't see a configuration like this. There's some famous archipelagos or other things that have unusual configurations of stone. So, they're much bigger. They're out in the island somewhere. I forget exactly where, but they're very famous. Here we're talking about Avnei B'nai Kulis, says Rashi, Merkulis, from Merkulis, and the Gemara will explain what it looked like. So if you walked along and you saw Avnei B'nai Kulis on the ground, are you just ignore it and walk by, or do you have a responsibility to announce? Toshma, come and listen. The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Motzo Mos Mufuzoros, if you found scattered money, Arelu Shalom. Ka'avnei B'nai Kulis says that Brisa Chayv Lahachris. Of course you have to announce, because Avnei B'nai Kulis is so unusual that it's not going to be anybody who will have dropped it. So if you announce, someone's going to come up and say, wait a minute, yeah, I have Avnei B'nai Kulis. And now the Gemara is just going to tell us, the Elohein Avnei B'nai Kulis, what is Avnei B'nai Kulis? It doesn't sound like it's something so unusual, but Avnei B'nai Kulis, achas mekan, v'achas mekan, v'achas al gabeim. It's really a triangle. Couple stones on one side, couple stones on the other side, and then a bunch of stones on top of them all. So it's almost like a triangle, if you will, but it's an unusual configuration. Says that Brisa, that if you walk by and you see Avnei B'nai Kulis, you're chayav lahachris. You have to announce it. Anyway, these are all what we learned this morning, different variations of how you look at Hashavas Aveda and what standard you use. So we see from the Chanina's standard, which is highly, highly specialized, to Rabbi Yochanan's standard, to the standard of, if I could just pick it up and scoop it up, that's enough. That there were different standards on what was a person's responsibility to return. That's really the essence of what the Gemara is coming to tell us.
Uh,
Now,
Okay.
questions?
So the interest, my takeaway from this is that this thing we're at the end of the last page with about that if you could scoop it up in one batch is, it seems to me then, since different people are going to come up with different patterns. Obviously, even this space coolest is something that, yeah, it came from this Avodah Zarah, but clearly if you're talking about being Machris, you're expecting that it was from Jews, and so they wouldn't, for sure, we would hope, not make it deliberately in the shape of an Avodah Zarah. The point being that some recognizable pattern. Different people have different patterns. It might be a pattern that I think of. A mathematician might think of a pattern of some symbol or whatever.
Exactly right.
Right.
Exactly right.
And
You have some pattern that you put into the that you
your coat of
laid out.
arms, whatever.
Yeah.
So what the end result then to me is that this thing about scooping it up with a piece of wood, or example, piece of paper is more what we think of, a piece of cardboard, is that it really just sets an outer limit on how spread out the stuff could be. If it's close together, almost anything could be seen by somebody as a pattern. And the one thing they would have in common is that even though it's a whole bunch of coins, it could be lifted up in one batch, where if it's spread out across the whole sidewalk, you couldn't.
Right. So you're right. This Gemara is giving us that standard. You don't have to go to the nth degree to try to salvage, but if it's salvageable in a sort of reasonable area where you can do something to salvage it, and again, that's going to be subjective. You're the one who's going to have to say, I can do this. I mean, certainly if it's spread over 5 yards, who's going to do it? It's too big. But if it's spread over 8 inches or 10 inches, hey, I can, you know what? This is very interesting. I can just scoop this up. It's so unusual that someone must have lost it in this configuration. So I'll go ahead and announce it. And again, it's not a big deal. I'll do it. If no one answers, no one answers. If someone answers, then I was kind of the mitzvah of the Shabbos Aveda.
And then there's one more twist to it, which is you could have a tower of sorts. I think of the game, if people know Jenga, we have these different pieces stacked up and you start pulling, so it's very precarious, and yet it's stable as it is. And yet if you tried to pick it up, the whole thing would fall apart.
Right. We're going to see a little bit of that in the next Mishnah. Let's just finish this last Gemara, which is not on topic, but it just ends this sugya. Hamotzi sela b'shuk. This is also very interesting. You're walking along in the marketplace and you pick up a coin, and a menashe, and your friend Chaim sees you picking up the coin and says, "V'omelo shalihi, menashe, that's mine. You just picked up my quarter." Lo omar klum, says the Gemara. No, nothing to it. Why? Chadashahi. And I'm going to prove you it's mine because it's a brand new quarter, just came out of the stack. Or Nirunasi, it's got a picture of Nero on it. In other words, I'm going to give you very specific identification. Nirunasi, Shamelach Ploni, it's an Andrew Jackson 1917 whatever dime. So in other words, he's very specific and say you clearly picked up my coin. Now imagine picking up a 1943, what do you call it? 1943 penny.
Nickel.
Was that?
Is it a nickel or a penny?
No, it's a 1940
Penny.
which could be worth millions of dollars.
Because it's a steel penny.
No, it was they replaced the pennies later with steel and other. This was a regular, what do they make them out of? Copper?
Right.
A 1943 regular copper penny is as rare as can be. So I happen to pick it up and you say, oh, wait a minute, that's my 1943 penny. Lo maklum. Velo owed. Not only that, ela afilu shemo kosovolel. Chaim's, you wrote your name on the penny. It's there. What we're talking about, look, my name's on it. It clearly is mine. Lo maklum if you ain't simin l'matbeya. General rule, there is no siman on a matbeya. On a coin, there's no siman. Why? The Omar Dilma Afuke Afke because even if it has your identification markers, you could say, wait a minute, sure it was yours, but you already paid the grocer, and the grocer paid the tailor, and the tailor dropped the money. So in other words, money is not identifiable. Now, it's different if there is a coin that, let's say you have a specific marker on that coin, your thumbprint, which is only yours and can't be replaceable. You say, wait a minute, that's, again, the kasha is not going to be, you can say it's mine, but it can always be spent. So because money has no root, wherever you find it, that's where it is.
You don't know its history.
You don't know its history, right? You don't know its history. Okay, so that, okay, so Rashi just.
As opposed to the ones that were configured in a certain pattern where it's only you who could have left it in that pattern.
Exactly.
It's found in that pattern. Okay.
Okay, so that's the end. So that's the end of the sugya. And Mitzvah Shem, next week we're going to pick up from here. Just one footnote to all of my dear friends and Talmidim and Chaverim is I'd like your assistance. Tomorrow I have to go in for a medical procedure, so I will be in the hospital for a couple of days. And if you have me in mind, Tuvia Simcha ben Chanaleah.
Say that again.
Tuvia Simcha ben Chanaleah. There is a chazal, and it's brought down that when a person's face Sarah, he should look for support. Push it. So, and just Mitzvah Shem, everything will be fine.
Before Shlema.
Okay. So hopefully next
It's
week we'll-
Tuvia Simcha ben Chavaleah.
Chanaleah.
Handling.
So barring anything unusual, same time, same place, same station. If there's any changes, I'll let you know, but I hope Mitzvah Shem, it'll just be a matter of a couple of days. And then we'll be full steam ahead and we'll pick up from where we left off here.
Ushalema.
Thank you very much.
Shlema.
Wonderful week. And Mitzvah Shem, Mana Shalom will give us all kaya.
Amen.
Yeah.